Hi there, my name is Katie Bartz from SewingScene.com, and I'd like to welcome you to my Inkscape Extreme Beginning Tutorials. Today's tutorial deals with creating text. Before we start working with text today, we want to make sure our workspace is set up just in a nice, organized fashion. And the first tutorial, if you haven't seen that yet, we'll go ahead and show you how to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead very quickly and set this up. I'm going to go to the File menu, click on Document Properties, and just for simplicity's sake, let's go ahead and display our units in inches on our page. I'm going to use a US letter, and I'm going to put it in landscape mode just for a change of pace here. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave this show page border on so that when I close this window, you can actually see the page border itself. Now what we also want to go ahead and open up our strokes and edits gradients tool, and that will open up in the properties window on the right hand side, as well as our align and distribute objects properties window. So these are just two that I always have open all the time when I'm working with it, because I'm in and out changing the outlines or strokes of things. I'm lining things up vertically and horizontally, and you will add and subtract properties to this particular window over here as we go along. So to zoom in on this particular page, it's kind of small to write text on, so I'm going to go ahead and click my the scroll button on my mouse as I hold down the control key. So control on the keyboard, and then you can scroll your scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in and out. And then the next thing I'd like to do is kind of move this page over a little bit so I'm actually working on the page. And again, the easiest way to do that is to hold the space bar on your keyboard while you're clicking your left mouse button and dragging that over to the area of work. All right. So we can see the edge of our pages right here. To create a font, what you're going to do is on the toolbar on the left-hand side, you're going to click the Create and Edit Text Objects. You'll see the shortcut key is F8. Simply click on that, and when you move your mouse into the workspace, you'll see that there's a letter A attached to your pointer. That's letting you know you're working with the text tool. All you need to do is simply click and start typing from your keyboard. I'm just going to go ahead and type the word dream. Now before I make any changes to this particular text here, I want to point out that the toolbar across the top is only active when this text tool here is selected. Again, if I choose a different tool from the toolbar, if I choose the zoom tool, you'll see the zoom tools will be featured here. So if I want to see and work with text properties, I have to have this text tool selected, and then those properties are available. It shows you which font you're using, if it's normal, bold, italic, underline, bold, condensed, etc. It will also show you your font size, and then a bunch of other properties that we'll be talking about through the series of text tutorials. This would be your justification buttons, left, center, right, and full justify if we're going to type paragraphs. So for simplicity's sake right here, let's just go ahead and leave this text. But I want to point out is if you're going to change anything with the text, you have to have this text tool selected, and you have to highlight the text that you want to be affected. So basically you're telling the computer exactly which text you're going to apply certain properties to. For example, if I want to come up here and I want to choose a different font, I can click down on this down arrow and maybe choose Bodini BD BT. All right, so if I select that, that is selected. If I would have only selected the last two characters, you can actually change the font of those last two characters because that's all that's selected. So it's very important to click and drag to highlight the font or the letters that you want to be affected. Control Z will take your text back to its original position and font, etc. I also want to introduce you, now that we have this selected, to this T button up here. It's going to show another properties button over on the right hand side. That allows you again also to choose your font, your justifications. If you click on text here, it will let you type in different text. All right, and as we click apply, you can see it says Dream again. Variants are going to be where you can set superscript, subscript, and unique features with capital letters, etc. So you can come in here and play with this, but I wanted to point out, if you're working with a certain font more often than not and you find yourself always changing to that font, you can select it from this list. And once you select the font and the font size from this list, all you need to do is select Set as Default. And you'll see once you select that as a default, it grays out to let you know that that has changed. Now every time I open Inkscape, my default font will be an Arial font, 48 points, and when I start typing, that's exactly the text it's going to be. We'll go ahead and X out of that window in the properties area so that we just have the align and distribute and fill and stroke tabs left open here. And we want to talk about spell check. So if I just go ahead and flip these two letters here, and I was going to be typing dream again, but dream we know is misspelled, but you might not know that if you're typing a paragraph. You can just glance over it quickly. If you again simply click and drag over the font or the letter or the word that you want to check, and if you right click on that, you will see check spelling. So check spelling is going to be an option right here. When you select that, once again it's going to open a properties window, and because we have that one word selected, it's automatically going to bring up words that it thinks we might want. And dream here is what we want it to be, so we simply click on that, select accept, and that very quickly changed that particular word to correct spelling. Now let's go ahead and change a couple of these words, and I'm going to go ahead and do dream again, and I'm going to change the I and the A. Alright, so we have two words that are misspelled here. I can right click on the fonts again and check spelling, and it doesn't know what words I have selected because there isn't anything highlighted, so I would go ahead and select this start button. When I click start, it's going to go through the entire document and check the spelling, and you have the option to ignore it completely or just ignore it one time, or to actually change the spelling. So let's go ahead and click on dream, select accept, and then it knows that this is misspelled. It's encased in red here, and there's the correct spelling, so I will accept that, and then we are complete. So when you're done, once again you can click the X in the upper right hand corner to close that property window out. To size your text, it's just like choosing a font. You want to make sure that you select the text that you want to change the size of. And then you can come here to this font size drop down. And these are in points. Just an FYI, 72 points is 1 inch. All right, so you can subtract that, and it would be 36 would be half an inch, and 18 would be a quarter inch, etc., all the way down. So if you can think of 72 points as 1 inch, 144 is going to be 2 inches. Just kind of give you a rough idea on sizing. Later, as we get through tutorials, you'll learn how to pull up grids on your screen so you can actually get the exact size that you need. But for this particular sample, let's go ahead and change this to 24. All right, so it only changed the word that I had highlighted. You can also, once you choose the selection tool again, you can actually click and drag to size the text. So you can simply click and drag, and if you see, if I don't constrain that text, I won't have proportional text. So what I like to do is press Control and Shift and draw from the center out. That will again constrain the proportions, height to width, and then you can resize your font by dragging. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here a little bit because my sheet is 8.5 by 11. You can see that's fairly large, but maybe you're making a poster or a sign for something. You can very quickly create some fun and fancy text. Now, if I were to go back to the text tool, select that, and I highlight the word dream, right, from the 48 points that it was originally, it is now, if we look at the font size up here, a little over 113 points. So you can always go back and check your point size on these objects to see what they have been changed to if you want to. So from our 24 point, we changed the word again to. It is now almost 57 points in size. All right? So that's fun. Okay, let's take another look at the properties bar here for the text. So I need to make sure again that the text tool here is selected, and maybe I wanted to change the spacing of the word dream. Let me go ahead and just remove. I'm just going to remove and delete the word again. We'll just concentrate on this word dream here. If I need to change the spacing between the letters of this word, again, it's always a better habit to highlight and let the computer know what text you specifically are working with first. We can go up to the toolbar, and on the toolbar there is an option here for spacing between letters. And if I click the up arrow, you will see that the spacing is increased. This is wonderful to give you a nice effect. Maybe you wanted 2 rows of characters. One has a longer word in it and you want it to be the same length. You have the capability now of stretching or decreasing the spacing between those letters to make that work. We also have the capability of changing our vertical spacing. So maybe I wanted that to be more of a subscript type character. Let's take a look up here on this tool right here. It says vertical shift. So we can actually change the vertical shift of that. So maybe you wanted your letters to go up and down like a wave. You could just easily change that vertical shift. And to go back to regular again, or to undo our process that we just did, just press Control Z, and we're back here at the beginning. Let's say we wanted to change colors of our font. This is one of the reasons why I like to have this fill and stroke properties window open here, because I have the capability of changing or filling with a font color. And one of the easiest ways to do that, and we're going to get back to this window here in just a moment, is to use this swatches here on the bottom of your screen. So let's go ahead and choose a nice blue color. So if I choose that for a fill, right, I want to take you back up to the fill and stroke properties and introduce you to this Hsl tab. Now most of you, I think yours defaults to RGB, and if you're printing and want to do it in a printing press type situation, then we have their CMYK capabilities. But I really like using this Hsl tab. It stands for Hue, Saturation Levels, and the area here for our alpha channel, which deals with transparency. And the nice thing about that is if I have a color here I really like, and I add an outline or what they call a stroke in Inkscape to this particular text, I can increase or decrease the levels, which changes it to a darker. If I slide it to the left, you can see the word dream is turning darker. And if I slide it to the right, I have the capability of changing that particular color to be lighter. And what's nice about that is you stay in the color family that you're working with. It doesn't change out of that color family. For example, if I chose a different blue, I have more of a royal blue here on the screen, it's going to stay within that royal blue family and just make it lighter or darker. So all your colors are going to seamlessly go together. All right. The hue we'll talk about another time. Saturation. This takes you from having color to actually removing color. So you can see I have more gray here, so I don't have any color in there. I've totally taken the saturation out. And here I've added color back and accidentally clicked on the red at the same time. But you can see that again. If I slide this saturation to the left, it removes some of the color, and sliding it to the right gives it more saturation. The stroke capability, so just in review, again, choosing the color from the swatches down below, and then you can fine tune your colors by moving the sliders here in the Hsl tab. Right? The stroke itself is what we call an outline. I mean, we know it as an outline, but Inkscape calls it a stroke. And if we want to add a stroke, what we're going to do is go to Stroke Paint here, and we're going to go ahead and add a stroke by selecting Flat Color. And if I want to remove this text, for example, I can come over here to this Stroke Paint tab in the Fill and Stroke Properties, and I can click on this No Paint, and it can remove that, the outline, okay, or the stroke as it calls it again in Inkscape. And if I add that back, it's going to take the default color. But you can actually change the color that you want. So for example, I wanted to make it the font blue, but every time I click on a color, you can see it's only changing the fill. All right? So to change the actual outline of the object, what I'd like you to learn and remember is to hold the Shift key. Hold the Shift key on your keyboard. You can see over here in the lower left-hand corner it says Fill is green and the stroke is black. If I hold my Shift key on the keyboard and then I select a color, that modifies the outline. So remember, stroke begins with the letter S and shift begins with the letter S. So to add a stroke to an object, it's a lot easier to hold the Shift key than to worry about which button over here I have to press in the Properties window. So maybe I wasn't really liking that particular color. Let's go ahead and again hold our Shift key on our keyboard, and we'll take the green here a little bit darker. I like that much better. So Control and rolling the scroll wheel on your mouse will zoom out, holding the space bar while you click and drag. Your screen will allow you to pan the screen very, very easily. And if I want to remove an outline, scroll the swatches here all the way to the left. And the very first button you see on the swatches says None. But which key do I have to press to remove or work with strokes? Yes, the Shift key. So if I hold the Shift key down, click on the X, I can remove the stroke on this letter, but I have to have it selected first. I didn't have it selected, so let me hold Shift, click on the X, so Shift X, and it removed the stroke. The last thing I want to point out to you, let me hold my space bar and move my workspace back to the center here, is I now need to make this a vector. Let's say I wanted to take this into my cutting program or my digitizing program and complete this. text, plain text is not going to work. For example, if I take this text and I click over here, I don't get those nodes that I was talking about the other day, even if with my select tool. When I click on it with the select tool, all I get is the sizing handles. If I click again, I get the rotation handles and the skew handles. I don't get those fancy nodes where I can change the text and know that it is a true vector. So once we have the text the way we want it, right, you'll select it, go up to your path menu, and select Object to Path. Now if I click off of it and I select the Nodes tool, and then select on my object, you can see each object now. Let me zoom in on that. Each character is now an object that I can work with individually and modify how it looks on the screen. If I want some drippy looking text here. Halloween is coming here shortly, so we can create some drippy looking text. All right, but you can modify it now that we have nodes, and your cutter or your digitizing software will be able to know how to create this because it has those nodes, and internally it creates the characters or a cutting file or an embroidery file based off where the nodes are. All right, so it knows from here to here you're going to possibly have a running stitch, or from here, this node to this node, you may have a satin stitch or a fill stitch. So it knows what direction to create those instructions in either the cutting program or the digitizing program. So let me zoom out here really quick again. I'm going to press Control Z a few times to take me back to my original text. And again, I went back too far because I clicked with my node tool and there are no nodes available. So use your select tool, go back up to path, object to path. Now when I select the nodes tool and I click on a character, you can see that they're all individual. One other thing I want to point out is if you're not going to be manipulating or splitting these apart in your cutting or digitizing software any further, it's just as easy to go ahead and select this text right here and prepare it appropriately for digitizing or cutting. And to do that, what we need to do is ungroup the text. So we're going to ungroup it, and when we select the text and we select the ungroup button right here, it says ungroup selected groups, we now have the capability to weld these letters together so they act as one unit. Because right now they're each individual, all right? And I may not want that in my other programs that I'm working with, my cutting programs or not, because it's going to cut each character maybe individually versus you want it to continue to cut the whole word dream and not jump down here to something else and come back up to the A and then go back down and cut a flower or digitize a flower and come back to the letter M. We want to treat this as a unit in our other applications. So the best way to do that, again, is to select the text. We went to ungroup. Now we're going to go back to path and we're going to use the union command. Union, weld, they're the same effect in any program. They just might have different terminology. But when I select union, what it did now is it made each individual character, this whole thing now is one unit, and I can move it all individually. And if I go to the nodes tool, you can see that now not one character has nodes to work with it. It has the whole word. So if I were to digitize this, it knows to do the whole entire word dream, like I said, and not do the letter D and then come down here and do something on the second line and then come back up and do the letter R. And because if it's reading this from left to right, there might be another picture of something right here that it would go down, do, and then come back up and do the EA, back down M. So it'll automatically digitize these letters in one fell swoop, or cut these letters in one fell swoop. So hopefully that gave you just a real basic introduction to text. We have several series of working with text here. We're going to show you how to work on a path and how to put text into a frame. We'll also in future tutorials show you how to break these letters apart and split them so that you can put other words within there. We'll show you how to actually apply text to a shape. So we've got some fun things to do, but I want you to go ahead and play around with creating text, getting used to this text tool again, and highlighting and the text before you change any properties, using the text properties window, spell check, etc. And the last point I want to make before I leave, before I forget, is once this has been ungrouped and welded or unified together with the union command here in Inkscape, you cannot edit that text any further. And what I mean by that is I can't take this and highlight the letter D. See, it just won't let me go in there and put the word scream instead of dream. All right? So make sure before you unify your text that it is exactly the way you want it to be. Otherwise, you'll end up recreating the whole thing over again, which isn't always a bad idea to get some practice working with text. But once you unionize it, it is set in stone until you take it to your other applications, right? So I want to thank you for joining me today in Inkscape creating text. And I want you to visit my website, SewingScene.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and go ahead and click the little bell icon to share it. So the more people we can get following, the easier it is to stay motivated to create more wonderful tutorials like this. We're going to start doing some really fun stuff now. So thank you.